Welcome to this session. This is part 3 of 4 parts. My name is Micheál Scully and I will be guiding you through this session. This resource can be engaged with by individual teachers or by collaborating with colleagues, as was done during the cluster workshops. The learning intention for this session is to explore the religious education assessment guidelines. We will focus on the assessment guidelines and in particular on the CPAs that students engage with during the 3 years. There are 4 scheduled assessment opportunities in which students engage during the 3 years of study. Students also continually have other assessment opportunities across 3 years through units of learning. Junior cycle religious education is built around units of learning. Units of learning encompass a number of learning outcomes or partial learning outcomes. In the previous part, we presented a unit of learning exploring charity and Islam. CPA 1 happens in 2nd year and CPA 2 happens in 3rd year. CPAs themselves are units of learning which take place over a period of 3 weeks. We will be looking at the overview of the 2 CPAs in this session. We will also be looking at CPA 1 and CPA 2 separately, as well as giving you an overview of the assessment procedures. An important note in the assessment guidelines is the message that our CPAs form part of our everyday teaching and learning that happens in the classroom. They are included in the allocated time for religious education, which is a minimum of 200 hours. The assessment task is based on CPA 2. The assessment task is worth 10% of the final grade, and the assessment task and final exam are overseen by the State Examinations Commission. CPA 1, a person of commitment. During a period of 3 weeks, with support and guidance by the teacher, students will research and report on a person whose religious beliefs and worldview have had a positive impact on the world, past or present. CPA 2, the human search for meaning. Students will, over a period of 3 weeks, with support guidance by the teacher, explore artistic or architectural or archaeological evidence that shows how people have engaged in religious belief, the human search for meaning, and purpose for life. It's important to note that non-exam classes can also use these titles for project work. We will now explore the 2 CPAs in more detail. There are a number of ways of accessing the specification and assessment guidelines. The most reliable is to use Curriculum Online. Here you will have the option to read the document online or to download it for your own device as a PDF file. We recommend that you download the assessment guidelines each year before engaging with CPAs. The assessment guidelines, unlike the specification, is a living document. Teachers should always check that they have the most up-to-date version. Changes may occur as the NCCA receive feedback from teachers and students. You can get more information on the assessments from our section of the website. Here is a short video on how to access the correct version of the assessment guidelines.
This is a short video to show you how to find the assessment guidelines. It is important that you do not search for this document online. Instead, always type in the official web address curriculumonline.ie to bring you to the Curriculum Online website. If you want to use the website in Irish, there's a Lagan Gaeilge tab. If you want to use it in English, go ahead to Junior Cycle and down to Junior Cycle subjects. When you click on that, it brings you to a page with all of the subjects. So scroll down and find Religious Education, RE, and that brings you to the RE homepage where you find the curriculum specification and right next to that the assessment guidelines. So the document is available there. You may wish to save this document, but please note that assessment guidelines can be updated. It is always useful to check the date so you know which document you're using. This is July 2019. When you go back to Curriculum Online, it'll always be the most up-to-date assessment guidelines, and they're the ones you want to use each year.
This is a table of contents of the assessment guidelines. The process for both CPAs and religious education is very similar. Both CPAs take place over a 3-week period. Both CPAs should be seen as part of the 3-year journey, not as something separate. Both CPAs allowed for student choice and student voice. Both CPAs focus on student process and progress during CPAs, as well as their learnings and findings. Student choice is also at the heart of both CPAs. The students choose the person in the case of CPA 1 or the topic in the case of CPA 2. Teachers can offer guidance and support to students in helping them to select the area of study. Students can choose to work individually or as part of a group. However, it is worth noting that there is guidance in the assessment guidelines on group work. On page 14 of the assessment guidelines it states that if students decide to work in groups, it is advisable that the groups are not generally larger than 3 or 4 students to ensure that all students can work effectively together. Also, if students are working in pairs or small groups, then it is important to ensure that the role and contribution of each student is clear and significant so that it can be assessed by the teacher. Students will make a choice on how best to present their learnings. This allows for multimodal presentations. Let us now look at some of the ways the students may decide to present their learning. Some suggestions are digital, such as vlogs, blogs, interviews and podcasts; orally, such as monologues, speeches and newscasts; or written, such as reports, essays and posters. This is not an exhaustive list, and many students will arrive at different ways to present their learning. We will now focus on CPA 1. During the period of 3 weeks, with support and guidance by the teacher, students will research and report on a person whose religious beliefs or worldview have had a positive impact on the world, past or present. It is important to note that students are researching and reporting on how the person has had a positive impact on the world. While students will add biographical information as needed, it is not intended that this should become a chronology of events or a linear biography from birth to death. There are 2 terms that we would now like to draw your attention to: beliefs and worldview. In the assessment guidelines, a person of commitment can be a person of religious beliefs or a person who holds a worldview. These are the definitions of beliefs and worldview. These and other definitions can be found in the glossary of the specification on pages 22 and pages 23. You may want to take a moment now to pause the presentation and to read them. These are learning outcomes on which the classroom-based assessment 1, person of commitment, is based on. The learning outcomes assessed well, to an extent, depend on the person the student has chosen. You will find these learning outcomes and more information on page 10 of your booklet. While the assessment guidelines are written for teachers, there are also pages that are very useful to students. These prompts will help the student to choose a suitable person to focus on and plan for carrying out good research. Inquiry, which guides the doing of the research, and students how I can do good research. Exploration, uncovering the values and beliefs of a person of commitment. This is what makes it a religious CPA aligned to specification. As previously stated, reflection, considering the past, present and into the future. This helps students build on their incremental learning. These prompts, along with an overview of the CPA 1, can be found on page 8 of the booklet. A person who, because of their religious beliefs or worldview, has had a positive impact on the world, past or present. The students will themselves select the person. The person might be known locally, nationally or internationally. They may be somebody who the teacher may not have heard of beforehand, such as a family member of the student. So, who would you pick? I now invite you to pause this presentation to reflect on this question using the prompts from the assessment guidelines that are found on page 10 of your booklet. If you are with colleagues, you can share your ideas and refer back to page 8 of the booklet to see if you can answer the prompt questions based on your chosen person. A key point in the religious education specification is the nature of learning as incremental over 3 years, activating prior knowledge, building on research skills, and learning to learn. Teachers will do this naturally through units of learning in first, second, and third year. Here we can see a learning outcome used in part 2 of this CPD, which is also connected to CPAs. The CPAs are part of this incremental learning. linking the learning from first year onward to CBAs, and the CBAs as learning in preparation for the final exam. Formative feedback on CBA 1 will help students for future units of learning and CBA 2 as well as their final exam. We are now going to look at CBA 2, which is linked to the assessment task. Students will, over a period of 3 weeks, explore artistic or architectural or archaeological evidence that shows ways people have engaged in religious belief, the human search for meaning and purpose of life. These are definitions for artistic, architectural and archaeological evidence. These can also be found with other important definitions in the glossary pages of the specification. These are learning outcomes on which classroom-based assessment 2, the human search for meaning, is based on. The learning outcomes assessed will, to an extent, depend on the topic the student has chosen. The assessment guidelines give us the following possible prompts and pointers as a starting point for students choosing a topic. These are just examples, and the list is not exhaustive by any means. I invite you to think about examples that your students might decide to explore. Draw up a list of possible items or places, and if you are with colleagues, take time to discuss how the search for meaning might be explored by students in your classroom. You might like to think about examples that can be found locally, nationally, or internationally. It would be useful to have page 12 of the booklet open to support you with this activity. I invite you now to pause this presentation to do this, and then we will look at how CBAs are assessed. It is important to note that we only use descriptors for CBAs. There are 4 level descriptors of achievement in classroom-based assessments: yet to meet expectations, in line with expectations, above expectations, and exceptional. All work submitted is judged to fit one of these 4 descriptors. Each CBA has its own unique features of quality. The features of quality are the criteria that will be used to assess the student's work as best fitting one of the following descriptors. Teachers use the features of quality set out in the guidelines to decide the level of achievement for each classroom-based assessment. When preparing to assess a student's work, it is recommended that you work from yet to meet expectations up to exceptional. Here you will see each descriptor for CBA 1 alongside its feature. You may wish to pause and read each one carefully. If you are watching this as a group, it might be a good time to discuss them in pairs or share your insights as a group. The features of quality can be shared and discussed with the students before they begin their CBAs. The features of quality for both CBA 1 and CBA 2 can be found in the booklet on pages 11 and 13. You might like to pause the presentation again here and take some time to look at them. The purpose of subject learning and assessment review meetings, commonly called SLARs, is to share and discuss samples of their assessment of student work and build a common understanding of the quality of student learning. Teachers should not assume that the results of a group of students being assessed will follow any particular distribution pattern. The student's work is being judged only against the features of quality rather than other student performances or previous performances or work. There are 3 components to a successful SLAR meeting. Teachers will, where possible, put forward a selection of work from the 4 descriptors: yet to meet expectations, in line with expectations, above expectations, and exceptional. You also need to have to hand the assessment guidelines to inform your discussion when considering the features of quality of a student's work. The NCCA will provide exemplars across the range of descriptors, and these will be available on the website www.curriculumonline.ie. There is also an elective CPD that you might like to engage with, specifically focused on the SLAR facilitator. This can be accessed in the CPD section of the website under Elective CPD. You may now like to pause and reflect on the statement from the assessment guidelines. How can the learning in Part 2 of this CPD support you to do this? Reflection has been built into the CPD throughout this session. As we are aware, reflection can occur before, during and after a body of work. There is now an opportunity to reflect on the learning and understandings that we have shared using page 23 of the booklet. On behalf of the team, I would like to thank you for engaging in this CPD. If you would like to access further supports, please access our website, follow us on Twitter, or send your queries by email. Please remember to take time to give us feedback on the CPD via the link on the website.